So having introduced that briefly, there's also just a couple of other things. Could you please stay mute when you're not talking? And if you can use the reactions button, which is the bottom of your screen, when you want to raise a hand to ask a question, that'll make it easier because I now have nearly 50 people on screen. So I'll be able to see those hands better than live hands probably. And people will be helping me with that. And also what we quite like to do at Dorset Can is if you're appreciating what somebody said, do please, that was a coin, do please go like jazz hands, we call them, just because it makes a huge difference if someone who's speaking for us and here, giving us of their time, they can actually get some kind of response. So could we just try that? Whoop. Yeah, wow, look at that. You see, it's a difference straight away. Okay, so without any further ado, I'd like to introduce, well, first let you know who our three speakers, our main speakers this evening are. We have Rebecca Sandover from Devon Food Partnership, who will be speaking to us for around 10 to 15 minutes about the situation in Devon and the more sort of systemic view. We've got Peter Sampson from the Land Workers Food Alliance, who will be talking to us about local food supply chains in sort of more in that direction, although they're also welcome to speak about what their passions are. And then we have Anne Hayden from Grow Your Own Rainbow Gardens project in Bournemouth, one of our local projects. So my proposal is that we will listen to the three speakers first. There'll then be some time for question and answers to that panel. And we'll then have some Dorset pop-up speakers who will be introducing their own work in this county. And if you're also welcome to put any anything that you're working with in the chat, including links, so that at the end I can send that out to everybody who's here in the effort to really see, is our network starting to network more and more. The pop-up speakers are from Help and Kindness, Bridport Food Matters, the Common Ground Project, Lucy Summers from EAP, and Open Food Network will all be also introducing us to their work. This was an open call for anybody who wanted to do that, and those are the people who've responded. So, without any further ado, I think, could I introduce Rebecca Sandover? And really, thank you so much for coming along, Rebecca.
Thanks, Sandra. I'm just going to introduce myself very, very quickly and then share my screen to share some slides. So I'm actually an academic at the University of Exeter, but I've been passionate about sustainable food for a long time, and that kind of drew me to go back to university to study it and to research it sort of alongside community food projects. So I've been involved, I'm a trustee of Food Exeter, which is a sort of food policy organisation in Exeter linked to the Sustainable Food Places Network. But although we were very active for a number of years, that organisation is currently a bit dormant. But I'm a member of the Devon Food Partnership and I sit on the steering group. And my slides are just going to talk through some of the background work I did with some partners in Devon before the setting up of the partnership, then talking about the work of the Devon Food Partnership and it's linked to national organisations and some of our sort of latest work that we're doing at the moment. So I'm just going to share my screen. I hope that's working for everyone. So this, thank you. So yes, I've introduced myself, and this image or infographic from my first slide is from a research project I carried out in 2019 with partners in Devon, and I shall be talking a little bit more about that in a minute. Oops, there we go. So yeah, this is just what I'm going to be talking about. I think I've already introduced that. So part of my rationale for trying to move forward this sort of partnership work in Devon was based on the wealth of food initiatives in Devon, and I felt, not just myself and others, felt that there was a need to coordinate this enthusiasm, this range of innovation and fantastic work that was going on. So I'm going to introduce that research project, then introduce the Devon Food Partnership, link it to the work of the Sustainable Food Places and their key 6 principles, and then outline some of the key work of the partnership, including the Devon Good Food Strategy that was launched in March. So I carried out a small piece of research with partners in Devon, linking action on health, economy, climate, communities, and the need for change. So as some of you will be aware, we've had a bit of a vacuum when it comes to an effective food policy in England. Whilst there has been some recent movement on that, we have had a lack of an effective food policy for a long time. And that has led to the setting up of organisations in communities to come together and to try and address the challenges linked to lack of sustainable food or lack of healthy food at a local scale. So the project I ran was looking at some key partners in Devon and looking at their wider sort of networks and looking at the work they were carrying out to try and change some of the, trying to create change at their community-based level. So initiatives such as community gardens, community cooking projects, issues around around food aid, and trying to address some of our health challenges as well. So I was particularly enthusiastic and interested about some of the amazing work that was going on around the Plymouth area, in the Tamar Valley, around the Totnes area, and around Exeter as well. So it's trying to sort of map these in sort of networks going on in these particular communities of trying to create change. An example would be around the Dartington estate in South Devon. There was a whole range of sort of innovation around food growing, sort of agroforestry, mushroom growing, and all sorts of projects that were coming together. And there has been this sort of rise in these key areas of sort of farms who are acting like as hubs, and they're putting together sort of produce from a local area to sell their produce through box schemes or through markets, and really doing really important work to try and protect the local environment, improve soil health, as well as improving the health of local communities. So like many places, there are challenges for progressing sustainable food in Devon. We are quite a complex county. We have a county which is, and with 8 district councils sitting underneath the county council structure, as well as the unitary authorities of Plymouth and Torbay. So that makes for a complex governing structure. But it also gives us an opportunity to share resources, swap best practices, and try and collaborate. But there are also some stark health and wealth disparities in Devon, and I'm sure that is true for many of such counties. So there's sort of health and life expectancy disparities between, for example, communities in the north of Devon and some of the wealthier communities, perhaps in the south or the wealthier parts of Exeter. And again, we have infrastructural challenges because there are key urban areas, but then there's widespread, more rural areas. So that sort of challenge for communities perhaps to travel, to access good services, sort of schools, hospitals, or good food retail opportunities can make challenges for particular communities as well. And as everyone is also experiencing these challenges, so there's obviously some sort of place-based challenges around climate change, COVID-19, and responding to the cost of living crisis. So this is just a small quote from the project I produced, and it sort of really highlights why someone like myself and others really wanted to come together to try and coordinate change around the food system. So there's a wealth of food initiatives, and they're trying to promote positive change. And by joining up the dots, by joining up and collaborating together, I felt there was greater opportunities for that change to be more effective. So I myself and others were calling for county-wide coordination of these initiatives to help really make a bit of a difference in Devon. So I think after the declaration of climate emergency in 2019, which many councils signed up and declared the climate emergency, I think that plus the COVID pandemic created an atmosphere where it was kind of ripe and for the council to support the setting up of the Devon Food Partnership. So the Devon Food Partnership was set up in 2021. Although it's independent of Devon County Council, it is hosted by Devon County Council, and they provided some initial funding for a coordinator to work on the establishment of the Devon Food Partnership. So, and then I think a year later, we were able to get funding from the Devon Food Places Network. And there has been some ongoing, I think some later funding has come in now from Public Health Devon. So I think now that the partnership is set up, there is a real sense of the value of the work of coming together, taking a more integrated approach to tackling the challenges of sustainable food. And the steering group members, I'm not sure quite of the number, we're probably, I would have thought about 15 members on the steering group, but we represent the breadth of the food system. So I'm on the steering group. We have representatives from the NFU. We have representatives from sort of regenerative farming businesses, Public Health Devon, community groups, and people who are working to support those requiring sort of food assistance and food aid. So like I said, there is a whole range of people on the steering group, and we all kind of represent the fact that we also link to our own networks. And I think that's really important. So it's kind of like scaling up and building up capacity. So we established in 2021, and this slide just gives you a sense of the focus of the partnership. And I put a link in the chat to the website for the Devon Food Partnership. So at the heart of our work is highlighting the 6 key principles of the Sustainable Food Places Network. And these are good food governance and strategy, the good food movement, healthy food for all, the sustainable food economy, catering and procurement, and food for the planet. So you can see from these 6 key principles that we again are looking at issues from across the food system. So we're not just looking at food production or consumption. We're not just looking at the challenge of food aid. We're looking right across the food system and obviously highlighting the challenge for our environment, for nature, and as well for our communities. So I'm just thinking, I think my next slide, yes, I'm just going to go back one. Oh no, sorry, can't go back. Can I go back? Oops, that's not working. Here we go. There we go. Going back. So I just wanted to point out at the bottom of the slide, I've got the badge for the Sustainable Food Places, and it tells you here that the Sustainable Food Places, it's a national body, and it's a national partnership programme led by the Soil Association, Food Matters and Sustain. And at the moment, I believe there's around 60 members of the Sustainable Food Places, and they are sort of members such as Food Plymouth. There's boroughs in London who are members of the Sustainable Food Places. I think Bournemouth and Poole were members, but I'm not sure if they still are. And so right across the country, Glasgow, Edinburgh, there's members of the Sustainable Food Places, and they really are an important body that can bring together sort of best practices, examples of change, examples where organisations have been able to work with their local councils. And I think it's really important that they kind of help to join us up and to really understand potential ways forward with the challenge of promoting sustainable food in the UK and bringing our communities along with us. So again, this slide just highlights again the 6 principles of the Sustainable Food Places Network, which we in the Devon Food Partnership have signed up to. And as you can see, I'm sure people on the call will appreciate the need to tackle all of these issues. For myself, and it wasn't just myself, lots of other people said, with the declaration of the climate emergency in 2019, it felt to me that an obvious win would be to try and influence councils and local authorities and other public bodies to consider changes in their catering and procurement, because I sort of, myself and others, see that as a way where we can get sustainable food from local producers into the diets of children in schools, people in hospitals, and in other sort of public bodies. That would be a great way to get high quality sustainable food into a wide range of people, and obviously that would go beyond the cost implications for the consumer. Obviously there are cost implications for the organisation, but there's been fantastic work in that area by a number of organisations who are sort of showing the potential in that area. The Southwest Food Hub, based on a dynamic procurement model, are also trying to create change in that area. So you can see that there's a whole range of issues that we need to address, but they are all interconnected. Even though they're complex, they are all interconnected. So if we could have healthier food in schools, we could, although that's thinking about procurement, we could tackle some of the issues around poverty and health outcomes for young people, for example. So I hope that gives you a sense of the 6 principles. So just moving forward, thinking about some of the future work of the Devon Food Partnership. Though I think I might have missed a slide that talked about the strategy. Anyway, if I have, I'll come back to it anyway. So some of the recent work that I'm also involved with.
Just a couple more minutes, Rebecca.
Yeah, no problem, nearly there. Is the challenge of food insecurity. So a strand of the Devon Food Partnership work has been to focus on food insecurity, and a Devon-wide charity called Devon Community Foundation have been leading work in Devon to create a body of evidence of the challenge of food insecurity in Devon. So myself and a community partner, we did some research around mental ill health and food insecurity in Exeter. Other people in Plymouth, they looked at inclusivity in food insecurity. Colleagues in Teignbridge and Torbay looked at the work of social supermarkets. So it's looking at sort of all different models so that we can go beyond the food bank approach. So that's just to give you an example of one of the strands. So that's kind of like a task group linked to the Devon Food Partnership, but it's had some separate funding to take that work forward. But obviously, I'm sure as everyone here would appreciate, it's a very crucial thing to appreciate. So what I've hopefully tried to highlight is by working together in partnerships, we can take an integrated approach to promoting sustainable food in a region. So by working as a partnership, we can bring together community groups, working with local authorities and food producers and others to try and create like a holistic approach to creating change. So if you follow a link I put in the chat, you'll find a link to the Devon Good Food Strategy that was launched in March this year. And as you can see from that, we're an organisation that's only been going a couple of years. We've launched a strategy, but what we're really focused on now is how to take that forward to make some sort of level of meaningful change, because it's no good if we just become a talking shop. We need to sort of reach out and make sure we're trying to create some level of change. I think our purpose at the moment is to influence policy change in the council, but also to scale up and build capacity and to support others. So as I've said already, I think there's great value in working as a partnership. You can take an integrated approach to tackling these complex challenges of our time. Partnerships can also flatten out knowledge hierarchies, because, you know, myself as an academic, I feel working with partners who work on the ground, tackling sustainable food issues, have got a greater level of knowledge about those issues than I ever will. So working together, we can share knowledge and sort of co-produce knowledge together. But it's important that we're not just a sticking plaster. There are sort of systemic issues that we have to acknowledge, even if we can't change them ourselves. And along the way, we need to make sure we're taking an inclusive approach to tackling these issues. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that gives a sense about the Devon Food Partnership. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That's wonderful. That's an excellent opening for us this evening. Thank you. I feel inspired already. If it's all right with you, we'll carry on to hear Peter speaking, and then we'll do a panel of questions. You know, the questions can come to whoever wants to address them afterwards, but I've already learned so much. Thank you. So can I introduce Peter? There's Peter from the Land Workers Food Alliance. Hello, Peter.
Hello. I've also got a few slides, but I'll introduce myself first. As Sandra said, I'm Peter. I work for the Land Workers Alliance on what we call resilient local food systems, but in essence, it's about farmer-focused short supply chains. And I come at this in a very meandering way. I started my working life many years ago as a cheesemaker, working on mainly what we now describe as agroecological farms. I then had about 20 years in conservation, working for Northumberland National Park and North Pennines AONB partnership. And then I meandered back towards food, and I worked for Food Durham, which is the County Durham Food Partnership, when we were also members of Sustainable Food Places. So the work that Rebecca has just described is very core to things that I have done in previous years. And you'll find quite a lot of overlap between the things that I'm saying and the things that Rebecca has mentioned. Because these things are all very, very closely linked, and it's not a surprise. So since February of last year, I've worked for the Land Workers Alliance, and we are a grassroots organisation for mostly smaller scale agroecological farms, and we do policy work, we advocate and campaign, we try and support farmers as and when we can, and you'll find us in the news every now and again. Currently, we're working on things like soy in agricultural foods for chickens and pigs and feed in animal in agriculture in general. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, if I can make that work, and that's the one I want to show.
You're muted. Is anyone else hearing this?
No.
I think you're muted, Peter. I'm very sorry.
No, I'm not hearing it either. I think it's
I
muted.
think it's okay. I think he's just muted and he'll come on in a sec. Oops, there we go.
I must have got muted while I changed over to my slide, so I'll see if I can
That's fine.
avoid that.
Just I think if you just share screen again and then unmute yourself, you'll be fine. There you go.
Now that should work. Yes.
Perfect.
Excellent work. Right. We're back again. So what you'll get is a little glimpse in my world, on my world view. And if we're talking about resilience in food systems, I think we need to build complexity, which means that it's not a straight line, and you'll find meanderings and things that are not quite perfect, and loops back. And in essence, what I think we should be creating to get a more climate and nature resilient system is a local food ecosystem, and trying to take our inspiration from the ecosystems that we're all part of. We have, over the last, well, maybe 200, but certainly over the last 40 or 50 years, we've made things more linear and less networky. And so that's, I think, what we need to rebuild as part of what we try and do to become more resilient and more climate friendly. You'll not be surprised that I, having worked in what you could describe as nature conservation for 20 years, that I don't think you can separate the two, and there is a risk that climate activism and nature activism sometimes end up at loggerheads. We're not at loggerheads. We should be working together. We should be allies, and we can't do positive climate work if we're not also at the same time looking after and improving the world that we've created around us. So that is a really important element of what my organization advocates for, and I think what we collectively advocate for. And you'll have already picked up from Rebecca's presentation that it is not just up to us and the individual eaters and people who buy food to make a different food system. Policy and the direction of travel and all of those sorts of things are really important. And sometimes in the national narrative, you get the impression that it's all about us making the right choices, and that's definitely not a solution for everything. It can help, but it's not the only thing. So you might ask yourself, why bother with all of this stuff? Why think about farmer-focused supply chains? Why can't we just say we set a policy and we'll make everything better? Well, there's certainly the shorter supply chains are good for all sorts of things, and it's one of the things that the Sustainable Food Places is very good on. It understands that food helps in all sorts of policy areas. Short supply chains in places like Dorset and the south of England. I mean, I'm based in Northumberland, so I'm always looking at you lot with a great deal of envy, because you've got far more options than we have at times. But shorter supply chains give more return to the farmers who grow the food, and it's usually better for the local economy. There's more circulation of money. The pound that you spend in a local farm shop is likely to circulate more closely in that immediate economy that you're part of than the pound that you spend in the Tesco's. I've already mentioned that smaller scale agroecological farming is good for the environment. There are environmental benefits and nature benefits to the way smaller scale agroecological and regenerative farmers farm. And if you're interested in that stuff, you can find an awful lot of them on social media and see what the results are of those changed practices. It builds a stronger community, and I think that's a really important element of what I feel is important in this world, is that we're linking back people who eat and people who grow the food, and that is something that we've lost. We often talk about we're having to educate people about where their food comes from. I don't like the word education. It's very much about sharing and learning and being part of the same community, so people understand or learn to understand how these things fit together. And shorter supply chains allow that to happen. There can be a great benefit in the reduction of food waste. A lot of the food that we're producing nationally isn't ever being used. It sort of disappears in the supply chain, and it gets picked up if you're really lucky, but an awful lot of still disappears down the sort of digester routes and sometimes even to landfill sites and such like. A lot of agroecological farms support initiatives around food justice, making sure that people of all incomes and backgrounds can afford some of the food that we're providing, although there is definitely work to do in that respect. And there is a growing evidence that fresher and better produced food is just generally better for people. Oh, that's gone too far. So there are loads and loads of different options and examples of short supply chains. I run the farmers market in my local town, and so we have about 25 people who are based within the sort of 30 to 50 mile radius of where I live, who come to the market on a regular basis. They make the stuff, they build relationships with their customers, and one of the aims that we have is to try and give you as wide a range of products to choose from. So you should be able to do as much of your weekly shopping as possible on a farmer's market and buying direct from those farmers. Farm shops are great places to pick up local food, and you can again you can talk to people. I think we sometimes underestimate how important independent retail is. I have a veg fan that comes to my village twice a week, and although he doesn't buy much vegetables from local producers, I can talk to him on a regular basis, and I can persuade him to pick other things. I can ask him to check out if he can find, I don't know, locally grown vegetables, which in Northumberland is more difficult, but an independent retailer in the south of England might find that easier to do. There's some great examples of online people who are selling their stuff online, and I'm sure that Joe a bit later on will talk about OFN and the way the food hubs work. A recent example of dairy farmers in particular getting into selling direct is vending machines. And it is not now just milk that's being sold. All sorts of other products are arriving in vending machines. If you have any of these things nearby, picking up on that and supporting them is a really important element. you will more likely than not have vegetable box schemes nearby or fruit box schemes nearby where you subscribe to buying on a regular basis from a local producer. And one of the benefits of that is that those producers have a not necessarily a fixed market, but a more steady market. They know what they're producing, they know what they're going to get as income, and that takes a bit of the risk away, because a lot of the risk in farming falls on the producers rather than on the rest of the supply chain. And things like pick your own is another example of being able to tap into local food networks on a relatively straightforward basis. It's not necessarily always easy for everyone. It definitely doesn't suit every producer, because it is learning another job. If you're a dairy farmer, you're not necessarily a cheesemaker. And I had a lovely example of somebody who came to my farmer's market who was a fantastic gardener. He still is one of the best people I know to grow tomatoes and things like that. But he found it very, very, very difficult to talk to his customers. And so there's multiple skills required, and that's not necessarily always easy for everyone. So being supportive and being kind and welcoming is always a good thing, and it's one of the things that we can all do. There are quite a lot of barriers. It's fine if you're a farmer already, and if you found your feet on the farming ladder. It's much more difficult if you want to get into food production and you haven't got access to land. And even if you can get access to land, it's not usually very easy to find anywhere to live nearby, because the prices of, as you'll always be aware, the prices of houses have gone completely out of kilter with what people in rural communities can provide. And then there's need for investment. If you want to set up a cheese making dairy, you probably need to think about something like £80,000 worth of investment or a bit more. And we sometimes forget how important the surrounding infrastructure is. And a good and very topical for me example at the minute is abattoirs. I am a very small scale sheep producer, and my local abattoir is closing at the end of this week, and I'm now having to rethink where our sheep are going to go. We're just coming to the time that we start thinking about doing our sheep boxes, and I don't know what we're going to do with that, but that is a really important element of the system that we need to create and need to support. So what can you do? What can I do? What can we all do? In whatever choices you make, and no one can be perfect. And if you come and look at my fridge, there's lots of stuff there that hasn't come from a local producer, but there's also an awful lot of stuff that has. It's important to talk about it. So when I get people around for a meal, we talk about where stuff has come from. If I go to a restaurant, I will ask people where the food has come from. And for instance, if they can't tell me where their meat has come from, I will not eat it. I want to know where it's come from. I am a meat eater, but I'm quite happy not to eat meat, or rather, I choose not to eat meat unless I know where they've procured it from, and they can tell me about it. There is a big role for community cooperation in this thing, as I mentioned, things like building communities and supporting organizations and others to build a better food system are really important elements. One of the box schemes in my area is community owned. So a group of people have come together because they couldn't buy local foods. They have clubbed together, set up this box scheme, and they're employing an individual grower on a sort of a 2-day, 3-day a week basis, and with volunteers and the professional grower, they make sure that they have their access to locally grown vegetables. And I was really heartened to hear that both Dorset and Devon have a strong focus on local food in their climate action plans, because certainly Sustain in their and Sustainable Food Places and in their investigations around how local authorities have implemented their climate action plans found that quite a lot of them haven't really thought about food, and that's an important element of it. Food brings together an awful lot of this stuff, and you'll be very aware of that, certainly after tonight's discussion. And skipped one. I've made a little list of things that you might want to have a look at, documents that we've produced, that Sustain have produced. Unpicking food prices is a very recent one, which is very interesting because it shows just how little of the current supply chains cash goes to the people at the end, the farmers. It is tiny percentages. Most of the value that you spend on carrots or bread or whatever disappears in the food chain, in the supply chain. So supporting local producers is one way of helping make that change. And finally, to my last slide, I've been reading a book by Roger Morgan Grenfell quite recently, and in it he comes at it very much from a conservation background. He's interested in birds and bird conservation and how we can benefit nature. But somewhere in the middle of the book, he makes the point that we can wait for plans to be written, and we can have discussions, and they're all really important, but actually we also all need to be activists. We all need to be standing up for the things that we think are important, and we can make a difference in that respect. So with that, I would hand you back to Sandra.
Peter, thank you very much. Thank you very much. That seems to follow on really well from Rebecca's talk as well, and thanks so much for all that additional information that you've brought to us here. It's really, really inspiring. I'd like to move on now, if I can, to Anne Hayden, and I'm sure she'll introduce herself and also the Grow Your Own Rainbow Gardens project. And when after her talk, then we'll have a bit of time for question and answers before the pop-up speakers. All right, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. My name's Anne Hayden. I'm a retired GP, and back in 2021, I set up a community interest company, so not for profit, but like a charity, called Your Planet Doctors. And I wanted to try and achieve two things. My passion has always been to improve mental health, and also becoming since my retirement, becoming very, very aware of the state of the planet, and particularly as well the state of the ecosystems and the soil. I realized very much that we were going to run out of food. So what I decided after much research was that how do we actually get people feeling better and producing food at the same time? And the research does show that if people grow together in small communities, it satisfies all 5 steps to well-being, both physically and mentally. And also there's the opportunity to bring communities together to help them improve their resilience in this changing world that we're witnessing. So it seemed that it was a bit of a no-brainer to bring all these 3 things together, if at all possible. And I got the opportunity when a housing association approached me, who owned quite a few houses in Southbourne on the Beaufort estate, and area of West Southbourne, and it was quite a disadvantaged community. And they said that after lockdown, they were really feeling, very, very depressed, very lonely. A lot of them just couldn't get out of their houses. The community had really fallen apart. And could I try my scheme with them? Well, yes, I thought, well, I'm going to really give this a go. They weren't prepared to give me any money, but still, never mind. They did in the end. And what actually we were able to do with the help of a brilliant charity, a growing and food education charity in Boscombe called Grounded Community. I'm not a grower, you see, but they are. And so they set several of the residents up on the Beaufort estate with raised beds and some nice quality soil and seeds and little basic gardening tools. And they got on with it, and it worked to some extent, but then things started to go wrong. I was the only person on the estate trying to help them out, and not being a grower, it was like the blind leading the blind. And we decided, all of us, that our mental health was deteriorating, not getting better. So, but then what was rather useful was that I started to get some funding. And when I had funding, I could start to buy in some horticultural help. And that's when I met my business associate now, called Lawrence Camilleri. And Lawrence had been the advisor to the Minister of Agriculture in Malta. And he was very passionate about chemical-free food, sourcing local food, bringing the community together. And we serendipitously met and realized that we could join our two visions together. And in that way, we could possibly find a way to feed the community, to make a community sufficient in food. So what Lawrence actually suggested was that we, instead of the residents on the estate growing several crops, that they tried just one. And they grew simple things like radishes or spring onions or pak choy, something that would harvest quickly and grow quickly and harvest quickly, and it didn't take all that much effort. And it worked really well. And we started doing workshops on the estate where people actually turned up. They found it difficult to turn up to things, but more people turned up to these. And the significance of this was that, Peter has been talking about food boxes. Well, Lawrence had come to England and had begun a food box scheme with the view of trying to persuade local farmers to grow organically by cornering the market, as it were. But of course, that didn't work so well because of COVID and food prices going up so much. So what we began was something called a crop swap voucher system, so that people who had grown their radishes and their spring onions in their raised beds would actually give them to us, and we would, or Lawrence would, pack these spring onions and pak choy, etc., into the food boxes, along with the fruit and vegetables that he had to buy in. But also, people liked the scheme, and we'd been given quite a lot of land to grow on, about 30 acres at the time. And so that the people who were growing the small crops from their own raised beds could have their boxes and their food combined with the food from the fields, and then the food would start to become more affordable, so that eventually, as the scheme grew and grew and grew, that we could bring the prices down instead of up, as what would normally happen, and people would get even better quality food. And what has happened recently is we've also been able on that estate to build a community garden, as well as the people growing in their own gardens. We've actually created a community garden on the edge of the estate, and we have built an education centre so that the people on the estate can actually come along to the education centre with their children and learn how to grow, how to cook their crops, how to be supported when they're lonely and they feel isolated, when they malnourished, all of those things. And we've started just beginning to work with the university hospitals, and we're going to be trialing some work. For example, we just talked about it this morning, some pregnant ladies who have gestational diabetes, so that during their pregnancy, they become diabetic. And a lot of these ladies are, you know, in quite a terrible state, and they really can't get access to the right food. And so what we're going to do is we're going to find those particular ladies on the postcode BH6 that we're working in, and support them with our support network to actually be able to have this food, that we monitor that they're able to eat it, that they learn how to cook it, that their children learn how to cook. So yeah, lots and lots of things are going on. And we are also ultimately going to be supplying the hospitals with their fruit and vegetables for the staff and the patients. And as we grow and grow, because we anticipate that that really can happen, because many people are getting very interested in this scheme and want to copy it, because I always wanted us to have a scalable template, which is what this is. We'll learn how to do it. We'll make the mistakes, and then hopefully not everyone else will make the same. And we will be able to really support and carry out research with all of these organizations, including the AECC Health Sciences University College, which is very close by to us. And we built them a great big garden as well, with the help of the asylum seekers from the local hotel. And it was built a bit like DIY SOS or Challenge Annika. It was done, most of it was done in a day, and we've got a video that will speed it up. But it's great because they're working closely with us too, and they wanted as a template to be able to hand to other universities. And we're using the garden. Ultimately, we will be using it for their rehabilitation patients, and to teach them growing and to build their mental health as well. So it's growing literally in many directions, and we're very excited by it. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's just wonderful to hear some of those links and networking in action, going off in so many directions from that initial vision. And also, I think Lawrence is with us here as well, so we can just see him there. Yes, hello. So Lawrence is there, Anne's business partner there. All right, thank you very much. So this is the moment if anybody has a question that they'd like to ask, bearing in mind maybe the umbrella question of the meeting, but maybe not. Maybe you're just really interested in something that one of the speakers talked about and would like more information or have a specific question. We've got about 5-10 minutes questions before we have our pop-up speakers. So if you'd like to click on the reactions button, put that hand. Lizzie's just asking what the umbrella question was. Don't worry. It was really just a guideline question of how can we support the shift to locally secure, low emission, nature positive food production and diets in Dorset? That was the kind of overall question. So could I start with Graham and Jackie Lamb, and then Julian Jones, and then Belinda? I'll take those three questions. Graham.
Yeah, hello there.
Hello.
There's been a bit of an elephant in the room over at Meat and Dairy, but I won't go on about that too long. But I am prompted to ask Peter. He talks about trying to do something about soya. I'm living in Weymouth, and we've got soya laden wagons coming in from the port on a you know, many every day. Peter, is that what you were talking about with regard to trying to do some work about soya? I'd be interested to know.
it's a big issue, as you'll be aware, and if you're seeing the soya come in, then you realise how much we're depending on what people describe as ghost acres mainly in South America. Agroecological farmers try not to use soya wherever possible. And the report that we did with a number of others, a number of other organisations, explores how farming, and especially the sort of the pork and chicken industries, might find a different way of doing this with homegrown pulses. You can have a whole debate separately about whether we should be eating meat and dairy in the first place, but if we could replace or minimize the amount of soya that we use and grow more of the protein that we think we need in the UK, then that's a positive thing. And there are small scale examples of farmers who are doing that. The Pasture for Life, certainly the certified farmers in Pasture for Life, feed their cattle and sheep entirely on grass. They don't get any imported feed, let alone soya. There are some examples of people who are doing poultry that don't use imported soya, but might use peas grown in places. So there is an element of experimentation, but it also it needs a wider debate about how we do these things. So the Soy No More report that my colleagues in the organisation have done is a first stab in that direction to try and start that debate.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Peter, and thanks for your question, Graham. Can we have a next question from Julian, then Belinda, then Lizzie?
Thanks, Sandra. So question really mainly for Rebecca, I think. I mean, as the last speaker mentioned, the elephant in the room is obviously the meat and dairy. I mean, from climate and nature perspective, as well as to allow more good local food production, overwhelmingly the most important thing is to reduce meat and dairy consumption because of the inefficiency of the process of having animals in the food chain. And we need to shorten the food chains, not really the supply chain so much. The disproportionate land requirement and the methane and carbon pollution produced by, as well as river pollution, is so important. And by shortening the food chain, consuming plant proteins directly rather than feeding them to animals, we free up land and reduce the pressure on nature. So the main question for me is how we market those messages and set incentives and subsidies to encourage transition in consumption and diversification to production of plant-based proteins. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yes, I think this is a really important issue. Yeah, and I think obviously this isn't my prime area of expertise, but I would say the majority of the research would support what you're saying. And the work, one of the sort of most well-known reports from 2021 was the Eat Lancet report that advocates the reduction in meat eating for health and planetary, for the health of people and the planet. So I think there is a growing consensus that we do need to eat less meat and less dairy, and we need to eat better quality food overall. But yeah, and I think there is still perhaps, and I'm not a soil scientist, but I think there's still stuff about the soil we don't fully understand, and there are perhaps very sort of regenerative approaches to raising livestock that can perhaps be of value. But again, it's not my full area of expertise, so I won't go into that. But I think, yeah, I'd certainly agree that we need to encourage the promotion of more vegetable, legumes production and consumption in the UK. I'm really inspired by the work of Hodmedods. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're an organisation, business and an organisation in East Anglia who just do absolutely incredible work about getting a range of legumes grown in the UK. And I think that links nicely. So we're not just talking about sort of plant-based eating, we're also talking about food security for the country, and also, you know, if we can, I mean, in a way, sort of whole food, plant-based eating, if we're thinking about pulses and beans, it is more affordable than a lot of meat eating, depending on where you are, perhaps in the world. So I think, yeah, it is important, and I think it does link with, I think there are growing the local authorities are growing awareness of these issues. And for example, Exeter City Council has passed, I think, a plant-based eating motion in order to promote plant-based food at their own events. So they're not saying you can't eat meat, they're just saying that they will promote plant-based eating. But I think for myself, I would prefer, and again, I have to put my hand up and say I'm not a nutritionist, but I think it would be better if it was more whole food based, non-meat eating, so using like local legumes. I might have gone off the topic, but I think there's a lot of public health people who are trying to promote healthy local food using sort of vegetables. I think there's been some great research. I think is it the Ocean Primary Care Trust in around Dawlish, who've been using sort of plant-based cooking workshops, sort of classes going over a number of weeks in order to help people with diabetes, obesity and issues like that. So I think sort of a considered debate on these issues and recognizing that we might have a range of different issues on this is important, but I certainly agree that there's a huge amount of value in supporting sort of whole food, vegetable-based eating, and I think there is a move in that direction. But yeah, and I think, so again, I go back to my talk, I think partnerships are a good way to try and tease out these complex issues and work with local producers to try and find approaches that work in their area. For it, just one last point, for example, near me is an incredible horticultural farmer, Martin Bragg at Shillingford Organics, and fantastic work, fantastic vegetables, real sort of agroecological approach to production. And he's always sort of experimenting with ways of making his amazing produce more affordable. So his latest thing is trying to encourage people to set up buyers groups. So if people bought their vegetables in a more collective way, that again would massively reduce the cost to the consumer. So again, another way that perhaps, you know, we can promote the consumption of high quality local vegetable produce.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That's great. And thank you for your question, Julian. So if we can have Belinda, then Lizzie, and the final question will be Francis. So if we could keep the questions concise, please.
I'm not sure I'm going to be concise because so much of what Rebecca said was so I was just going to say we had so I'm on Dorset Council and we had a members meeting a few weeks ago, and then actually went to the same place with Dorset Climate Action Network. Was it last Friday? Wasn't very long ago. And it was really interesting there. It's Dorset Wildlife Trust. Well, Dorset Council has bought a few acres of land in Dorset, and their Dorset Wildlife Trust is managing a project there to rewild it and also open it up for community use for things like community growing and a forest farm and a dog walking area and a play park, all of that. And it's just really striking because they were telling us that it was intensively farmed before, but it was all of the crops being grown were for animal feed. Is that right? And all of the animals that were being farmed or the livestock was all for pet food. So none of the intensive agriculture, which was doing so much damage sort of downstream and with the nitrates and phosphates going into Poole Harbour, none of that intensive farming was actually going for human food production. But yeah, it's so what I was going to say is Dorset Council really they're playing catch up with Devon in particular, but with other places. And the nature recovery strategy is going to be very much based on what local groups are already doing. So there are going to be opportunities for us to, to sort of harness all of that and feed it into what local authorities are able to do. And plant-based things, yeah, I've got some stuff from Cornwall that ideas of what they can do to try and promote that in a way that is supporting the farming community. So any advice you've got on how effectively to do that is great. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was for me. Yeah, that sounds really like fantastic work. And as you were saying that, it made me think about the wider work of the Sustainable Food Places Network. These community-based or local-based organisations work best when there is a charity or a community group that's collaborating with the local council, that was one of the challenges we had in Exeter. The local council, again, the two-tier structure meant the local council had less responsibilities. So anyway, I won't go on about that, but I think that could be a really important, perhaps, way going forward around these issues is for sort of getting more and more stronger links between the council and local community groups. And yeah, I think the work of like local nature partnerships and the local nature recovery agenda will be really important. It sounds like you're doing some really important work there. And I would really suggest getting some advice from the Sustainable Food Places people. They're really helpful. The Devon Local Nature Partnership have done some fantastic work, and they've been working, I think, with farmers and the Environment Agency over dealing with like livestock pollution in rivers and things like that. So again, perhaps they can be of assistance. But I'm not sure if I fully addressed your point, and I'm very happy if you want to follow that up with me afterwards.
Thank you. That's really generous, Rebecca. And I'll come back to the Sustainable Food Places at the end because it's been mentioned a lot this evening and might be a further step for this community that's present. Can we have a quick question from Lizzie and then from Francis, and then I would like to move on. Lizzie.
Hi. I'll try and make it quick. Thank you. It's really interesting talks. So it's a bit of a bigger question for anyone who can answer it really, but I'm just so I'm based in Somerset. I'm running a community food growing project, and we're trying to tackle all of the issues that everyone's trying to tackle here. My question is, when we talk about resilience within food systems, what are we thinking of in terms of adaptation to an increasingly to put it bluntly, increasingly fascist state and society that we're living in, particularly in the UK, but around the rest of the world, and particularly around when we talk about resilient food systems. So I work at the Organic Growers Alliance, the Kindling Trust, and at a market garden, and none of these people are answering the question. We're all looking at resilience against or within the changing climate and ecological context, but we're not looking at the society that we live in. And just to give some context, I've seen 3 or 4 cases in the last 6 months of market gardens and community growing projects being either just like vandalized kind of generally, or specifically targeted and destroyed, basically, salt being poured on the earth, polytunnels being ripped up. Food is the most vulnerable point of our society, as we all know. There are ways that we are definitely mitigating the crisis. So obviously all the projects that have been spoken about today have amazing ways to mitigate that and to build community. But how do we adapt to the inevitable? We can't just grow if you excuse the pun, our way out of an increasingly fascist society where people are going to get hungry, people are going to start fighting, people are becoming more fascist, and will start attacking the vulnerable points. So I don't have the answer to this. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I would love to talk to more people about this. But it just seems like the question isn't really being addressed that much on, how do we work towards more adaptation against the fascist society and state? Sorry to dumb the mood.
That's your question. No, not darkening the mood. I'm going to pass that to Peter in case he has anything that he'd like to say to that.
Okay. Yeah. I recognise your thoughts. I might perhaps not use the same words, but I take inspiration from a podcast which I can't exactly remember the person, but it was in the series of Accidental Gods by Amanda Scott, where we were exploring, or the podcast was exploring just these sorts of issues, and the counter trend is in building those smaller communities. And it's one of the reasons why I was sort of harping on about that the networking and the ecosystem of smaller food systems that are not based on big industry and big chains. So I can't tell you how to counteract societal trends, but I in my own world, I try and make sure that by having more connections with more people doing more different things, we build the resilience to withstand anything that happens like that. That's not really an answer, but you know where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you. If you could put that reference in the chat to the podcast. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? No. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Great. Okay. So I was just saying thank you, and if you could put the reference to the podcast in the chat, that would be great. And Francis, my screen is frozen. So Francis, could you give us your question?
Yes, it follows on quite nicely. It's very heartening always to hear from people as we have tonight, very encouraging. However, I think we have to keep in mind that we are up against an extremely powerful food industry lobby who really control the food standards agencies and many other things. Against them over the years, Professor Tim Lang has been working away. I'm a bit out of touch with him. I'm just wondering if any of the speakers can tell me, is his work actually cutting through? Because the impression I get is that it's not.
Rebecca, would you be able to answer that? Are you familiar with?
He's was professor of politics of food. He's emeritus professor now.
Yes, I know Tim Lang. I'm just wondering if my screen's frozen, so I can't actually see if I'm being heard. But
yes, yeah, we can hear you. Good. Thanks, Sandra.
Would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, thanks, Francis. Yes, yeah, he's a total inspiration, Tim Lang, and he was an author on the Lancet report from 2019. So I guess his work on that has cut through. I think he's emeritus professor. I mean, the last thing I heard, I think he's still very active. I do get your point.
Yes, he is. He's attached to London University.
Yeah, so City University, and I think he had some link with Cardiff University as well. But I do get your point. It's very difficult. I think Tim has been doing inspirational work when he was part of the Sustainable Development Commission under the previous Labour government. And it was a really backward step to have that commission stood down. And so I think, unfortunately, his voice has been on the sideline a bit because of the current and ongoing political system, or don't quite know. The sort of the worldview that's been promoted is obviously very sort of growth focused. It's profits, shareholders, and it has been making things harder for people doing food with a lot of heart in it, thinking about social and planetary challenges. It's making that a lot harder for everyone trying to make that level of difference. But on the other hand, I think there have been counterpoint to that challenge in the sense of the work of the protests around the climate emergency, Extinction Rebellion, the transition town movements. There is also a groundswell of people who are coming together and using resources such as, like we are tonight, using technologies to join up, collaborate, share our voices, and to try and be heard. Yes, I think you make a very good point. There are some very entrenched vested interests that we struggle to make a point in order to make change. But I totally agree with what Peter said earlier. Coming together in our communities, we can make change on the ground. We can create, such as Anne's fantastic project, we can make a difference in our local communities. And that, I would say, can build a level of resilience in our local food systems. And perhaps that addresses as well, perhaps some of Lizzie's point as well, that if we can work together, building up a sense of strength between ourselves, we can make a change on the ground. Yes, we'd like to see a wider change, and perhaps it will come. But at the moment, we're not seeing it coming particularly quickly.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That's been some wonderful questions and also those responses. What I'm going to do now is move on so that we can have these 1 minute, hopefully, introductions to various other aspects of the food cycle and the work going on in Dorset. And can I ask Help and Kindness, Wendy Allwood? Could you introduce your work at Help and Kindness, please?
Hello, right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you've got 1 minute starting now.
Oh gosh. Hi, my name's Wendy. Yeah, I'm from Help and Kindness, which is a community interest company based in Dorset. We've got all sorts of projects that we're involved in, but the one mainly I'm here for is food security or food insecurity. So we've got a website with directory, and we try and link in with all the food projects across Dorset, so food banks, social supermarkets, community fridges, etc. The project that I really wanted to talk to you about, though, was pop-up larders, which is something that's just started in Dorset. So what they are is taking food that's low-cost food, so it's probably not exactly on the local agenda that we're talking about here so much. It's really excess food from supermarkets. So FareShare gets it from the depot in Southampton, and they've got mobile food van that comes to Dorset, and we've got mapped different areas where there's food insecurity, quite high prevalence of food insecurity, a lot of people on, or a lot of children on free school meals, etc., quite a lot of deprivation, but they haven't got access to a local food bank or social supermarket, so a lot of the rural villages. So it's like a membership type project, so that people can sign up. There's no sort of criteria, there's no vetting about, what their financial situation is. But they will get, for example, for a family of 4, I think it's £5, and they get about between £20 and £30 worth of food. So that's once a week. There's not a lot of choice. They get what excess food there is, but it's affordable food, bringing it to the community. And then the plan is that there's going to be wraparound support for those people in terms of like CAB, pop-ups, citizens advice, and mental health support, maybe housing advice. So they'll probably be based, for example, say in a village hall. So you will have like a whole host of services coming in. The other thing I quickly want to say, I think I might be nearly out of time, is that we've got also a Feeding Dorset, had a Feeding Dorset event back in April where some of you came to, and we're trying to link up a lot of this food security and food insecurity with growing projects and local cooking projects. So if anyone's interested in linking in, we've got another event coming up hopefully in October. That's it. I'm going to shut up. But please contact me.
Thank you. Can we
if you
give
want
some
any
jazz hands for Wendy? And I think we've got your link in the chat. Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
lovely. Thank you. Right. Thanks very much.
And then could I ask Bridport Food Matters, who are well known, if they'd like to say something for a minute or so? Candida.
Hi, I'm Candida. I'm going to speak on behalf of Bridport Food Matters, although there are a couple of other colleagues here on the call. So, and also apologies, I can't speak very clearly at the moment, so I hope you can understand me. But
Clear.
So Bridport Food Matters is aiming to increase food security and community resilience in the face of climate change and other global pressures. And we found it's not easy to engage people in that kind of wider vision of the food system. So we tend to focus and try to break it down into elements. And I suppose we've got three main approaches, and these are interrelated. And the first of those is trying to help build a network locally, being to some extent an umbrella to help join up the dots. And people have talked about that earlier on tonight, and increase the visibility. So as well as a lot of local retailers and suppliers, a certain number of local suppliers and restaurants, etc., there's a massive number of community food projects which do a range of things: growing food, mutual support, health and well-being, food surplus stores, and this kind of thing. So we're trying to give visibility to that. And if you look at Sarah Wilberforce's screen, she's got a picture behind her of some of these. We're just mapping out what are these projects and where they're existing and other potential connectivity between those. Wonderful. And the opportunity to get involved. So we've got a website as well, and that lists all the groups. And we've got a newsletter that we send out to, I don't know, 300 or 400 people. We run events to try and engage people in different aspects of the food system as well. And we partner with others for specific initiatives and events, such as the Food Festival, which celebrates the local retailers and food economy, but also, for example, the Home in Bridport, which grows food in schools, mostly in areas of deprivation. So that's one side, which is the building a network. Then we've got linked projects, Bridport Food Matters project, and this is a more kind of on the cycle of buy, grow, cook and eat, and trying to look at how the interrelationship between those different elements. The main one that we're trying to develop is to build community connections and access to food, especially for the underserved, and that is through trying to design we're aiming towards creating a community food hub, and that would include a community shop, a cafe, a kitchen, a space for workshops, and bringing people together, recognizing that food is at the heart of the community. This is an aspiration at the moment. We've done a lot of research, a lot of consultation, and hopefully we can move forward with that. Two other linked projects would be encouraging people to grow more of their own nutritious food, and we have allotment ambassadors who really can open their allotments and organize events to show how they are trying to grow climate adaptive food. And a new project called We Dig No Dig, which is promoting community composting and then planting in unused spaces like the Incredible Edibles do. And finally, on the projects, we've got one that we're piloting, developing with half a dozen landowners, which is about increasing the supply of healthy food direct to Bridport, persuading landowners to set aside small acreages for long-term leases for producers. And this will reduce food miles, but also at the same time help increase access to land for new entrant farmers. And one of the, Lucy, who's speaking in a minute, Summers, is part of that project, pilot project. And finally, the third strand of a third approach is engaging in policy where we have opportunities to do so. So, for example, we're working with the town council and a couple of people from the Land Workers Alliance to produce a food security plan, which will hopefully feed into the town's investment plan, linking up with Dorset Council. And we're commenting on that. We're reviewing the climate emergency strategy, and so we're trying to make comments specifically on the food side of that. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do at the moment.
That's fantastic. Could we have a show of hands for Bridport Food?
And other colleagues, Rose is here and Sarah Wilberforce, as well as Lucy Summers, are all involved directly in food matters.
Thank you very much. That's great. And Common Ground Project, 1 minute. Are you there?
Hello.
There you are. Hello. Could
Yes,
you tell us
here we go.
about this stretched 1 minute? Thank you.
Stretched 1 minute, exactly. Here we go. Common Ground Project, 1 minute intro. We've even
Excellent.
named it the 1 minute intro. Land Trust for Diverse People, Food, Ecology and Economy. So hello, I'm Cian Willett Dalgleish, and this is my husband, Graham Willett Dalgleish, and we're co-founders of the Common Ground Project. I have a master's in anthropology, environment and development from UCL and 3 years coordinating Stanford Regenerate. Graham has 20 years working in food production, farming and market gardening, 5 years creating and coordinating Stanford Regenerate, which is a collaboration between Stanford Hall, Leicestershire County Council, the Soil Association and other local farms and businesses to use school food procurement to regenerate farmland across Leicestershire. Our story. So back in 2021, we bought 47 acres of land on the Devon and Dorset border, just outside Lyme Regis, with the intention of freeing up access to land. We spent the following 2 years speaking to thousands of people, asking them 3 questions. 1, how would you like to use the land? 2, how would you like to see the land best used for common good? 3, what is stopping you from living the ecological life that you long for? And what we found, interesting talking about elephant in the room, the number one stated barrier to ecological living, food resilience and sustainable livelihoods is planning authorities and planning policy, stated barrier. We also found that we needed to create a slavery-free intra-farm economic system, a cooperative land usage pattern, and an intergenerational agrihood neighborhooding system to ensure people's security on the land, regardless of their stage of life. So now we have created a UK-wide rural planning support network, and we are pulling together regional groups to support the movement towards regenerative settlement across the country. If you want to find out more about our work, you can watch our 2 presentations. I'll put the links in the chat. Watch our 2 presentations and fill out our collaboration form, and we'll be in touch. Also, there is land available and we are accepting land usage proposals. And if this is of interest, please email us at commongroundprojectuk@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Great to hear about you and to meet you. So yes, do put that in the chat. As I said, I've got the whole Zoom thing is just about holding out here at the moment. So, but that's my problem. Thanks, Common Ground Project. And Lucy Summers, could you tell us something in 1 minute about your current work? Where are you, Lucy? There you are.
Hello, I'm here. Yes, I'll try and stick to 1 minute. So first of all, I want to say that it's not Lucy Summers, it's really Cock Crowing Farm, and that's what we've called our agroforestry site and project that we set up on the outskirts of Bridport. It's actually just about a quarter of a mile from Bridport, so it's absolutely ideal in terms of growing food, local food, and importing that into Bridport and getting the local community involved, all of which we want to do. I say we, I'm a horticulturalist, started off in horticulture, went into garden and landscape design. Now I've come back to horticulture, but with a real mission with my partner Chit, who's an environmentalist, and he's a very, very interested in foraging. That's his kind of particular interest. And so we've kind of decided on this project to set up this agroforestry farm with the help of people like Martin Crawford in Dartington, who was mentioned earlier, I think, by Rebecca. Why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because we're extremely worried about the 4-crop rotational system that that farming kind of goes along by at the moment. We're extremely worried, obviously, about the environment, insects, all of that, the reliance on meat. We would like to, I would particularly like to show people the huge diverse range of vegetables, nuts, bamboos, the huge diverse range of edibles that we could have on our doorstep. So we would like to expand the range of food available locally. We would also like, we aim to show what can be grown. You know, we aim to experiment with climate adaptive crops. So we're looking at things like almonds, we're looking at growing things like persimmons, We've got the trees in where we are rolling it out, and it's incredibly exciting. I mean, the third role is we really do believe in education in the most positive way, and we really would like to bring schools in, have an educational role, get people involved with picking the fruit, cooking, do demonstrations. We've got restaurants who are very enthusiastic. We've got bakers who are really enthusiastic about, you know, baking bread from chestnut flour mixed with other things. So we're absolutely raring to go. I should say that we're growing, it's an emphasis on perennials rather than annuals, trees and shrubs grown with crops rather than animals, which agroforestry can be trees grown with grown alongside animal production. We're looking at nuts, leaves, berries, bamboo and fungi. We've already got a fungal patch set up with a chap, a mushroom expert locally. And we're looking at things like unusual trees that you can actually have vegetables from, do stirs fries from, like tuna. So we've got so many ideas, so many plants are all ready to go, and we're doing it now. And yeah, that's it really. We're just very enthusiastic. We'll drag some of you in.
Thank you very much. And would you put the name of your project, as I didn't have it, if you could?
Yeah, it's Cock Crowing Farm, because it's Cock Crowing Corner. Okay. Report. So I will put that on there.
Put that in the chat. That would be great. And then people can know where to find you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And then last but not least of our pop-up speakers, not at all least, is could we have the Open Food Network? That's Joe. I can see you smiling with patience. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm kind of hijacking this a little bit. I live in Dorset. I'm near Wimborne, but I want to tell you very briefly about the Open Food Network tool that is used by a lot of food hubs, a lot of local food networks to create these resilient short food supply chains. We are we're a cooperative, we're not for profit. We're a group of real people behind a software platform that's been created. And the idea of the software platform is it is a way to bring together multiple products from different food producers and then get them to the local community as easily as possible. One of the food hubs that we work with a lot is the Tamar Grow Local, which I think Rebecca mentioned earlier. I'm going to see if I can really quickly show this to you, if it will work. Because I can talk to the cows and come home about what this is, but when you actually see it in real life, you'll understand. So yeah, it's, as I say, it's a tool that people can use. This tool has been developed by people who are growers, food producers, farmers. It's used all over the world. And about 8 years ago, it was brought to the UK. Yeah, it's a way of getting your products to the market. It's an online tool. So as you can see, there's loads of different products. And then you've got the grower here, Hester's Harvest, but it brings in all sorts of different growers. It's really transparent, so people can see the price and how that price is broken down. So it's a great way of building these food networks. And there are other technologies out there that do this, but we are open source, which means we're not owned by anybody. So the technology will never be taken away or changed. It's all built from the bottom up. So it's literally informed by the people who are using the tool. They're developing it, and it's all based around food. So it's like, you can buy bulbs of elephant garlic, you can buy bunches or weights and measures. It's all fully designed around food. And it's basically designed so that food growers don't have to worry about the tech. I think someone mentioned earlier that, yeah, you can have, Peter was talking about someone who could be amazing at growing tomatoes. They're not going to want to spend the money or take the time to build a website and manage that website. So it's all really easy for people to use. And the cost is, we don't have any upfront fees either. So you can come along, anybody can use it, even if you're a market garden or you're a florist or you're a butcher, anything. Up until you start trading £500 per month, the technology is actually free to use. And the way we do that, Common Ground are happy about that. The way we do that is because we, as I say, we're not for profit, we're a cooperative, we work on lots of really cool projects and we get grant funding in to do that. We're all part-time and we have volunteers working on the project, collaborating on the technology as well.
Thank you. And we have to wind up.
Running out of time. Last thing I wanted to say, we've just been doing a really cool project where we're using the technology to do dynamic procurement into schools and hospitals. We've done a pilot project in Wales. So this technology can be changed and amalgamated to sort of power up food hubs, local food networks, and use technology to do all sorts of really exciting things like distributing free food and community pay it forward schemes, stuff like that. Okay, done.
Thank you so much. If you could. That's wonderful. I think that's a really wonderful 1 minute pop up to close on this evening, because that could be that just knowing that you exist could be wonderful to those who perhaps don't yet. So thank you so much. And I'm going to say, because we're nearly at our time now, first of all, I just again want to thank all the speakers that have come and given of their time freely, it has to be said. And really appreciated the amount of knowledge that's been shared here and experience this evening. As I said at the beginning, I'm no food expert, but in doing this, in creating this meeting, I've learned a lot. And I've become very interested in the sustainable food places that Rebecca and Peter and several others have referred to. I'm in contact with them about the possibility, very, very loosely, of Dorset County becoming a member of that organisation. So if I do open up a conversation with them, Dorset Can wouldn't want to lead on that. We don't actually have a food team, we have a land use team, but Dorset Can would certainly support the networking capacity. And what I'll do is anybody who's at this meeting will get information about a possible introductory meeting with Sustainable Food Places, just to see if as a county or if different organisations in this county, we might be interested in joining that organisation. And other than that, I wanted to say that if you'd like to become a member of Dorset Can, this is my moment to say, please become a member of Dorset Can, either as an individual or as an organisation. And it's free. You'll be getting our newsletter. What happens is that if there's some kind of crisis or tipping point in the sort of county-wide, we move very quickly to try and communicate with everybody. One of our main functions is networking. And we do have some of our own campaigns. The Great Big Dorset Hedge will have been heard of, but we do have both sides to the organisation. So please do sign up, because the more people we are, stronger together. And I also very much appreciate the diverse views that have been here this evening and the fact that we've been able to hold those all together. And that is really the main way forward as I see it. So, yeah, I just want to thank you again. And there'll be a virtual pub open here until 9:15 for anybody who wants to stay and chat informally. The Zoom room will be open for another half hour. Giles, have I forgotten anything? If not, I wish you well. And yeah, please stay and chat with each other if you want to. I can't see a thing because my screen's been frozen for the last half hour. I'm just deeply grateful that the whole thing didn't collapse on me. So good night and thank you very much. And
Sandra, you've done an absolutely fantastic job, particularly with your screen off. We're all